today. We've got some incredible marketers here. I'm going to start going down the line. I guess this closest to me is Scott Griffiths. He holds the unusual title of CFO of marketing over at Farmers Insurance. How does it go? Bum, ba-da-dum, bum.
Close enough.
Close enough. Gordon Henry is Chief Strategy Officer and Executive Vice President at Thrive. Thrive has some fans in the house, $1.5 billion software and marketing services company that services small to medium businesses. Al Saltiel is Senior Vice President of Marketing, E-commerce, and Customer Satisfaction for AutoZone, which is an $11 billion specialty retailer. Marissa Thalberg has been named one of the world's most influential CMOs by Forbes. Previously was CMO at Taco Bell.
I didn't bring a posse, okay? Come on, help me out here. Thank you.
And is that? I've never seen such excitement for marketing and fantastic. So let's get into it. We have a lot of different businesses with different mandates, and we're going to be talking about the specific challenges to each and sort of the commonalities across the board. Gordon, let's start with you. You are something of a 100-plus-year-old startup. Your biggest challenge is client acquisition. Why not, which is not consumer-facing? Are there tools or tactics that work from the consumer marketer's playbook, and are there tools that don't translate at all?
Sure. Well, hi. Just the 100-plus-year-old part. So our company started in the Yellow Pages space, so we date back to names like R.H. Donnelly and Dex Media and Super Media and YP, which was part of AT&T, and all those companies were either acquired or merged together. And today, we're Thrive. We rebranded about 6 months ago, formerly known as Dex YP. And our business is software for small businesses as well as marketing services. And we acquire customers traditionally through a field sales force as well as a telephone-based sales force. Mm-hmm. And more recently, we've moved into really creating a marketing funnel, sort of consumer-like marketing funnel using offline media as well as online media. It's been very effective at driving leads inside to us. But the part that doesn't translate from consumer to SMB, which is our world, is really scale. There's 300 million plus consumers in the US, there's 30 million small businesses, so 10 to 1 sort of ratio. So obviously the amount we can spend on branding, on offline, is much more limited. We have to be much more targeted in our approach.
And are you from a consumer space where have you had experience in both?
I've been in the direct marketing space for consumer, but way back early in my career, and more recently in the past really 2 decades, I've been in the SMB space.
Right, so a lot of changes. Marissa, you were the driving force behind the Taco Bell Hotel. Did anyone stay at the Taco Bell Hotel in Palm Springs?
But did you want to stay at the Taco Bell Hotel?
If you heard about it. Yeah. Talk about the idea of experiences and traditional campaigns and sort of how brands should navigate the balance between the two of those, because Taco Bell is obviously not something you can scale, and yet we all heard about it.
Yeah, I think it's just a very important moment when we're operating on so many different levels, and a lot of what we're going to be talking about here is increasingly taking friction out and digital experience and how to make that better and better. But there is a corollary to that, which is how we connect as human beings and how brands connect with our consumers in the real world. And so I think this idea of complementing these incredible digital experiences with incredible real-world experiences and thinking that it's the totality of how you show up that really matters is important today, especially for brands that have physical product or a physical place like a restaurant or a retailer. So that's why it was a powerful idea for us, and there was actually a lot of strategic rationale underneath it. But the great thing is when you do something wildly unexpected yet somehow right for the brand, it does get people talking, and we had just an enormous amount of buzz around it.
Yeah, and you worked with Edelman, which is a PR firm, which has not normally or historically been in the creative space, although they're moving more and more there. I guess this is something that I could throw open to everyone, which is what is the mix of agencies that you're working with, and what's that looking like? That you can speak to the Edelman experience, but I'm curious to hear from all of you.
I can. I mean, Taco Bell is a big brand with a big budget, and so we absolutely do some things in-house, and we absolutely rely on agency partners. I think one of the things that I felt most strongly about when I arrived and was sort of getting a sense of the team coming from a totally different industry, by the way, was really feeling like it's a moment where agencies, when they show up and they're on your roster, have to behave like they're part of your extended team. And in turn, you as a client have to treat them like part of your extended team. So I think that, sort of sitting back like, they're vendors, that doesn't work. That's not how you're going to get the best partnership and understanding what's going on. So you asked about, so Edelman did the hotel. Yes, it was a division of Edelman called UEG. We'd use them for a couple of things, including they produced, if some of you saw the Forever 21 and Taco Bell fashion collection we did a big fashion show. But I love that idea of having this integration between how your media agency, your creative agency, your in-house teams, in this case our PR and now events team, all work together. And it was, different ones play the lead at different points in time, but it's about as collaborative as it can be.
Yeah, I think similar story. We try very hard to work in a collaborative, integrated fashion with all our agencies. I would say we are moving more to a best-of-breed model where we've got a creative resource or a data resource, but a lot of small agencies too on SEO or SEM. But the key is really having our internal teams work and the outside teams as an extension of the internal team. And I would say over time, we'll probably do a little bit more insourcing, but I don't see the outside model going away, at least not for us.
Yeah, we use a number of different agencies, as was said, that collaboration between internal and external. I think this tension between having one agency that kind of soup to nuts versus these sort of discrete agencies who do specific things has always been there. It's been around for a long time. I find us today moving more towards the specialization. Maybe that's just because the evolution of the market. But we have an agency we use for sort of offline direct marketing. We have an agency we use for digital, mostly digital marketing. And then we have another group we're using for things like pricing and profitability today. So it's become pretty specialized. Not so much in B2B. We don't have really a B2B agency, but these are sort of, if you will, kind of vertically oriented, sort of they take care of their piece of the marketing funnel.
Yeah. Scott?
No, I agree with everything that's been said. I mean, it really is a hybrid model we have at Farmers. But as Marissa said, it really is just a matter of whose payroll they're on. We're all working in the same direction and on the same team. One of the challenges with using multiple agencies is actually making sure everyone is on that same page.
For sure.
And not treating them just as specialists for something else. They're actually part of the broader marketing organization and need to be moving in the same direction.
So Farmers has been around for a long time. It's hard to stay fresh with insurance companies like Geico that have a lot of like wackiness out there. You obviously have a spokesman who's an Oscar winner, which probably doesn't hurt. You've been doing a good job with compelling campaigns. What is your strategy for going up against their sort of ubiquitous approach?
Yeah, I mean, we're outspent by a lot of our competitors. And while we're obviously envious of the Geicos who spend 8 to 1 for every dollar that we have. What it's forced us to do is to be focused. So we've spent a lot of time understanding the customer in our environment, the insurance customer, understanding who they are, where they are, and what they need from their insurance company. And by doing this, it quickly became apparent that there's a segment of the population out there that really want to buy what we're selling, or at least they're interested in it. Our value proposition appeals to them. Now, conversely, there's a part of the population that just will never be interested in our value proposition. They have different priorities that we're not going to meet. Now, it's the toughest thing in the world to actually turn your back on a segment, because as marketers, we want to be able to prove that we can sell to everybody.
Reach everyone.
But actually, by doing that and making that very black and white decision as to here are the people that actually are interested in what we're selling, it makes some of the decisions far simpler. The channels that we want to reach, the media partners we want to use, and the content and creative we want to make. And also leading down to the customer experience in terms of providing them with a service to meet their needs and expectations. So that's kind of a key, and hopefully you see it in our campaigns where we're not going toe-to-toe with Geico trying to compete on price. We're trying to give a message in a format that our customers will relate to.
Marissa, I want to bring it back to you. Before Taco Bell, you were at Estee Lauder, is that right? You made a point of making Taco Bell with the hotel an appealing, almost exclusive experience. Talk about how brands can or should play in that world of exclusivity or even luxury, and what that means in terms of appearing the right way on social and shareable clips, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, that is a packed question.
It's a lot of questions.
So much I'd love to say about that, because it was very interesting going from luxury to mass, and of course from beauty to fast food, and in my case from New York to California was probably the bigger shock. But you know, it's interesting. When I was at the Estee Lauder companies, a year or two into it, the Great Recession hit, and so here you are in this luxury world. And I remember we were having conversations called how do you reframe value? And value wasn't a word that got bandied about a lot in the halls until that happened. Conversely, when I went into this world of, I mean, very, very mass market products, I think I felt a responsibility to flip the script that way and get under what are the emotional desires that we all have. And I'll tell you something, when you're in a business where it's so closely tied to the heartbeat of America that you can feel it in your sales when gas prices go up or when it's payday, and then you stop and think about what that means. That means that there are Americans out there who are choosing between a taco or a gallon of gas. That's really poignant. And underneath that, it really starts exposing that people want great things, but they want to be able to afford them. And it's that syntax that really matters. It's not like we don't just want what we can afford, we want what we want. So for me, that became a really interesting way of reframing value in my mass market world was, let's not just yell price points at people. How do we make this emotionally gratifying? And then the punchline is anyone can afford it. So very much to your question, I think there's an interesting interplay between exclusivity and inclusivity. You know, we want to feel like we belong, but we also want to feel special. And I think there's a fairly universal insight that can be applied to almost any category or sector. It's just how you play it out and how you storytell it that should be specific to your brand. So
when you talk about a thing like a hotel that a limited number of people can stay at, what are the KPIs in that case? What was the brand looking to?
Well, when you do something like a Taco Bell hotel, you know you're creating a moment for a brand. So you're obviously not necessarily going to correlate that to how sales are doing around the country that day. You're looking at other metrics in terms of relevancy and saliency, and even maybe certain quality perceptions of the brand. But when you think about return on investment, I mean, for what the expense of that was versus the amount of earned media we got, it was just, and it was multiple cycles, so it was really well managed, so that from the moment we announced it, then the day reservations went live, we had a war room set up because we were actually afraid we were going to crash the reservation systems about 100 other hotels, so we were really prepared, an integrated team. 2 minutes of reservations were sold out.
Wow.
So then that was another storytelling opportunity. And then, of course, at the event itself and the aftermath. So the amount of content and stories and then the word of mouth that generates. And we all know at the end of the day that as great as, you know, paid advertising is, and I love great paid advertising where you control the story, to have people talking about it in really positive ways and you're feeding the imagery, but they're feeding it themselves is it's pretty spectacular when you create a moment like that.
Yeah. I did not get my invite, but maybe next time. Al, AutoZone is primarily a sort of brick and mortar retailer. Talk about Amazon as a disruptive force in retail and how that's affecting your ability to do your job.
Sure. Well, no question about it. Amazon's a great company. They're a formidable competitor. But I think in our case, they've made us better. If you look at the retailers who I think have struggled in the Amazon era, it's when they try to become more like Amazon to compete with Amazon head on.
Yes.
I think in our case, we've focused on our physical space. We still add 150 stores a year in the US.
Wow.
You add 150 stores?
We're adding 150 a year, and we have for the last decade. And hopefully that'll continue on into the future. So I think part of our answer is the experience within 3 or 4 miles of probably everybody's house in this room, and growing, and making it seamless from online to store. I think the other thing, in Amazon speak, another way to think of our 6,000 stores is 6,000 fulfillment centers. So for us, having inventory available locally when you're in the need, If your car battery is dead this morning, people don't really want to wait a day or two. They want to solve it now. And I think that has served us well. Certainly the mindset of having inventory close to the customer and focusing on that customer experience in the moment.
So like it's brick and mortar scale. It's scale in the
sure.
physical world. How about the rest of you? When you think about Amazon, what do you think about? Anyone?
Yeah, sure.
What?
Well, I mean, I love that answer, because that is how you acknowledge head on that there is a behemoth in the marketplace that's a challenger, but don't just try to replicate their playbook to compete, but find your, what are your unique strengths? And I think that's true in almost every industry right now. I mean, food's a perfect example too. So you look and you think, well, in some ways we should be a little impervious to the Amazon threat, but not really, right? Because of delivery. And so we were working with third-party aggregators. What does it mean when an Amazon buys a Whole Foods? So, I mean, I think it is about leaning in even harder to what makes you unique, and then being willing to adapt and change and be Darwinian about it, because it really is the only way to continue to survive and thrive.
Yeah.
I mean, their biggest asset is they probably know more about our customers than we know about our own customers.
Yeah, that's
and I think
fair.
that's the key, the challenge in competing with Amazon is and Google and Facebook, all these guys have a real good sense of who our
The
customers
data.
are and how they behave and think.
Yeah, and I think what Amazon is doing, and a lot of other disruptors out there, they're changing the expectations of customers. So whether they're as big as Amazon or a smaller company that's just changing expectations, whether it's about delivery date or speed of service or ease of doing business, we got to take note of these, not just wait until they become the Amazon.
What is the biggest misconception about data that's out there? The things that people think is right that is maybe not necessarily right?
Data? Well, I would say while there's a tremendous amount of data, it's not always as tied together as people might think it would be. For example, I would say for us in our space, the misconception is what I call reverse append. There was always this idea that if somebody called in to us or to a business and we had their phone number, we could find out everything else about them. And so we would sort of reverse append all the other information about them, and then we could market to them. Not so easy. It's really more like Swiss cheese. You get a phone number and you get little pieces of data about them, but it's never the complete picture. It's never as easy to use as some people might think it would be.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree with that. I mean, there's an enormous amount of data. Making it useful, actionable, and timely is where the challenge lies. And I think everybody's trying to figure it out. We're working at it really hard. But certainly, when you get it right, it creates a great moment to delight a customer.
I mean, I'll just add to that. I feel like, we're all rushing to the altar of data to try to figure out how to, worship and practice it effectively. But the part two that goes with it that's, I think equally, if not as hard to solve, is then how do you match that level of personalized storytelling and content with the opportunity to talk to audiences of one.
Right.
And to do it where it doesn't feel like a computer just spit it out, the content. That, to me, of really trying to not only not lose the beauty of really great storytelling, but find ways to make it even better and richer, but still surprising and interesting. I think that's a really big challenge in a lot of mature organizations right now.
Like the right message at the right time,
Yeah, I mean,
the right person.
Right,
Yeah.
like it sounds so simple when you say that as a concept, but then how do you operationalize that in a way that feels right is still really challenging for most organizations.
When you get a great Yext review, you want to acknowledge that review to the customer in the moment.
Oh, nice plug.
So.
Yeah. We at Ad Age, I'm sure you all subscribe. We recently did a story there was a Mobile Marketing Association survey that found that more marketers are moving towards multi-touch attribution, which they're saying could reshape the landscape in the next year to 5 years. How are you approaching attribution? How do you see that shaking out in 2020 and beyond? And I see vigorous nodding over here.
John Wanamaker said, half my advertising budget is wasted, I just don't know which half. It's still kind of true. We do a lot of A/B testing. We'll use a media that's working for us, and then we'll layer in another media and see if that reduces the cost per lead or the cost of the acquiring customer enough to pay for that additional media and so forth. And that's how we're tracking it, because it's very hard to find out the exact ROI from each advertising piece when you're doing them all together. So we're kind of take an incremental approach. But again, one of the things that we have to be very careful of, because our targets are SMBs, is all of the offline media is going to be much less efficient for us than for most of the people up here.
Yep. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's really important to try as best you can to track that purchase path and understand each lever that you have to pull within that. Online, it's becoming more and more prevalent, and thankfully with addressable TV and connected TV, it's becoming more that you can track that offline activity a little bit better. I mean, we still have the impact of what's the benefit of sponsoring a national golf event, which is what we do, but hopefully we're getting more and more. But the more you can track that purchase path, the better you can see what activities, particularly those top of the funnel activities, which tend not to get credit for that eventual sale, are actually contributing towards those lower.
You're building the brand up there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned TV. A couple of you have thoughts on TV. You did Farmers did a series on Hulu. Is that correct?
Yes.
Talk about that, and then you have thoughts on linear, which are different. So.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the first question you asked about reaching our target customer and being outspent 8 to 1 is we're always looking for innovative and creative ideas to get our message across. And what we found that, that reach and frequency, just banging on at the same commercial, seeing it 3 times during that one program, isn't actually as effective as it should be, right? People just tune it out. So we actually did
get annoyed.
Get annoyed, which is even worse, right? And so we actually did a series of commercials, episodic ones, through a Hulu episode. So you're sitting at home watching your Hulu episode, and periodically there will be a story being told consecutively, because we know that person A is going to watch this one first, this one second, and this one third, to actually tell a more compelling story, a more interesting and a more engaging story that, again, puts us a little bit apart from our competitors.
And then Marissa, you were...
Yeah, no, I love that example, Scott, because I think, again, we can still get to consumers today. It's just a lot more complicated to do it. And even in the medium previously known as television, I mean, what we even think of as television, you can say linear, but it's OTT, it's on demand, it's all these different ways that you can, be advertising in a show that someone wants to watch. And then I do think that's such a problem. I mean, I feel that way as a consumer. I'm like, God, I'm in this industry. Why doesn't this advertiser know that I've been watching this show on Hulu and I've seen that ad 5 times, and I really didn't need to see 3 of those 5, let's say. So I think that is one of the imperatives that the industry actually really needs more guardrails around frequency caps and how to manage that when we're trying to advertise across these different formats now of television. But the good news is we can still, it's harder, it's more expensive to do what we all used to do, but we can still get to consumers. Consumers are still viewing. There's a little bit of a false narrative that they're not. It's just, and you guys all know this because you probably are doing this yourselves as individual consumers. We're watching differently. So for me, that's been exciting because it does actually allow you to introduce the idea of data and segmentation into a medium that targeting used to be adults 18 to 49 over and out.
Yep.
So that's the good news.
Yeah.
I think they all work hand in hand, though. I think we employ a balanced mix of media. Certainly in the last 5 years, search has become a bigger part of our media mix. But you see a lot of people watching TV and then going to Google and connecting those two activities. I think between being there when they're there and watching TV with a tablet, I think it creates a great opportunity to have TV work better with digital.
Yeah. Are you seeing anything in your demographics? Are there all these stories about millennials not buying cars and cars sort of...
It's hype.
It's hype.
There's 270 million vehicles on the road. We serve vehicles usually outside the manufacturer's warranty very well, so it's a huge population. And I think the other thing that's changed, certainly in the DIY business, is YouTube. And all the millennials now will figure out anything, can do anything based on a YouTube video, and I think that's been really positive force for our business.
In the story that we did on the multi-touch attribution, we spoke with Lou Pascalis, who's at B of A, he's also at the Mobile Marketing Association. He calls content the marketing panacea of our time. Content cures all ills, and your face
Wait, so say it again. So content
is the marketing panacea of our time. What do you think of when you think of content, just generally?
Well, for us, and it's not even our content, user-generated content is huge. And that takes you back to the YouTube story. You could find how to fix a car on YouTube. That fuels sales for us. We can't possibly create enough how-to videos for 400,000 SKUs. It just would not be a viable plan for us. So the idea that the content's out there, it's user-generated, I think consumers trust it more too. And I think that's been a really good thing for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear, like, nobody wants to be sold. Everybody wants to buy and find it themselves. We heard from Mark Ferrentino this morning about intent-driven marketing. It's a really important shift. Now, we've been doing basically interruptive marketing for 100 years. It's not going to be replaced overnight with content marketing as a panacea, but I think it's a series of steps to get there. We're definitely out there doing that. It is driving inbound leads, just not enough to replace what we used to do. But part of what we do with Thrive is enable small businesses to create content so that they start bringing local consumers to them, which is not something they were doing before.
And are you working with B2B agencies?
I'm sorry?
Are you working with B2B agencies?
Yeah, we work with agencies, as I was mentioning before, who understand our problem and help us solve it, but they're not exclusively B2B agencies. They're agencies that work for a variety of customers, but usually they have some expertise in our space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can create as much content as good as it can be, but it's a case of do people believe it? You know, as Howard's opener suggests, there's a lot of content out there that just isn't true. So what we're trying to do is make our agents, of which we have about 12,000 scattered around the US, seen as those experts that can be trusted. And one of the ways of doing that is giving them a digital presence, but also allowing customer feedback on those agents. All of our agents have agent reviews, so people can know that when they go to them, they're a trusted source that someone has relied upon before. So it really is about gaining that trust with your content.
Right. And just switching gears slightly, because I'm curious about some of the things that you're up against, Marissa. You work at Taco Bell. It's a nationwide quick serve fast food restaurant. Are you feeling the pressures of the meatless movement at all, or are you thinking about that in any way?
Oh, yeah. I mean, not so much pressure, but just I actually love that we as people are evolving our sensibilities around food, and I think it's great. So what it does is allows different brands, companies, et cetera, to figure out what's their rightful place in this modernization process. So in my time at Taco Bell, one of the things that we felt is how do you not look like you just jumped on a bandwagon? Because I do think sometimes there's a bit of a blowback that you get when it feels contrived, but not look like we're completely tone deaf to how the world was changing. And our realization was one of the bigger untold or lesser told stories about the Taco Bell menu is how unbelievably strong it is for vegetarians, and that you can customize the menu, and it's not, if you're at a concept that's more around burgers and fries, there's definitely been a necessity to try to introduce some alternatives like these plant-based alternatives. But for us, I mean, you could take any product that you like, starting with a taco, and substitute black beans or refried beans and have a really robust, satisfying meal. So just, and then doing the right things in terms of removing additives and sodium and all that. So, I mean, a lot of those things Taco Bell has been doing for several years, and we weren't chest beating about it. We were just doing it. And then that becomes a really interesting question as a marketer. Should we have been beating our chests more loudly so more people knew? But then does it start to feel, I don't know, like you're just you're doing it
patting yourself on the back.
To pat yourself on the back and to be sort of not doing it for the right reasons. So I think the exciting thing is to be able to, I mean, our jobs really are this amazing intersection of culture, business, and psychology. And if you're keeping step, but making sure that you're channeling in a way that is right for your brand or business, you usually will find the path forward that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that means we're out of time. I'm not sure, but we could do this for a whole nother half hour. I do want to toss one last question out there. This is something that we talked about on our phone call before this, and you were sort of dismissive about the narrative. But I would love to hear all of you weigh in on the tenure of the CEO across the board and the trend lines of the so-called shrinking tenure that CMOs have, and how their role is changing in general. It's a bigger topic.
Well, I just shifted from CMO to CSO, so I guess that says something.
So there you go. Yeah.
A lot of headhunter calls. It's not all bad.
A lot of what?
A lot of headhunter calls. It's not all that bad. It's a good market.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know I was giving you a little bit of a hard time on the call because, so I did just make a pretty public declaration that I was going to take my next step outside of Yum, although I'm still consulting with Yum, because a 4.5-year tenure was really substantial.
That's long. Yeah,
and I
something
wanted
like
to have
24
a new
months now,
challenge.
18.
And I love, love, love what I did at Taco Bell, and I love my team, and I'm really proud of it. So I guess I just feel that we as marketers could be doing a better job storytelling our own careers and our own roles, I guess, within the industry. I think it is true that the tenures sometimes are shorter than they should be because there are sometimes enormous expectations on what this role can deliver, and with data and technology and all this folding in, it's a lot. And what I humbly suggest is we shouldn't get distracted by the different titles, which to me, every company has their semantics. Call me Chief Growth Officer, Chief Brand Officer, Chief Marketing Officer. So long as we're all talking about what it means similarly, it's a naming convention. I think the bigger issue is how do you set these types of roles up for success in our ever-changing world, because that's what businesses need. Like, fundamentally, we're here to figure out how to connect with the consumer and grow the business. And it's just requiring a whole bigger suite of skill sets underneath us that we have to be these wonderful conductors of an orchestra. And that orchestra has a lot more instruments playing than ever before. That's the complexity of it. Sorry to mix some metaphors there, but that's what it really feels like today. And you hope that in any organization, you have the rest of your C-suite, putting some wind in your back to be successful against all that.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Marketing and advertising, the data available now is changing so quickly. I think CMOs have to move as quickly as that, and some of them and cannot. And I'm just hoping that the role of CFO of marketing is one with a lot more tenure than that.
Yeah. We didn't get into that specifically, but next time.
That's the next time.
I believe that means we're out of time.
Yes.
If I'm reading that correctly. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.